their hands. You should be on muted mode. For the sake of time, I'm just starting right now. So thank you everybody for joining this webinar, which will look into EUDR solutions. From an FSC point of view, we will have FSC introduce the regulatory module. We will have a look at the FSC trace in detail in this webinar. First of all, thank you for your time for joining with us. So in this webinar, I'm joined by Dr. Suresh Gairola, who is the India country director for FSC, and then we have Anuj Sharma, who is the deputy country director for FSC, and then Michelle, who is joining us. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle from Hong Kong. She's a deputy regional director for FSC Asia Pacific, and myself, Adarsh Mohandas. I am the regional director South Asia for Preferred by Nature. The topic for the day, we will have an introduction session, which we have gone through, and then we will look at EUDR with the most recent updates, what has happened to the legislation, what are the cutoff times, what are the most recent updates, what are the implications, and so on. And then Dr. Suresh Gairal would speak about what is FSC and what is the work on EUDR till to date in terms of the work done by FSC. Then we will have Michelle, who is talking about updates from other Asia Pacific countries, what's happening in terms of EUDR. And then Anuj and me will together look at FSC EUDR aligned solutions, especially the regulatory module and trace. Anuj would be speaking for most of the part here. Then what we have kept is we as an organization, we receive a lot of queries from clients related to EUDR, and we have put some of the questions that we have received, and we'll try to answer them for you. And then we have an open session, which will be a question and an answer session, which, if you look at your screen on the top near to chat, on your right hand side, you could see a Q&A there. You could click that and type your questions there. And for the rest of the webinar, it will be muted, and just the presentation part of the webinar will be recorded, but not the discussions that happen after the webinar. And this is an online webinar. Maybe somebody has a connection issue, but they will come back, but we will manage. But we hope to have a stable connection throughout the webinar. So having said this, let's have a look at the EU Deforestation Regulation, or EUDR as it is called. So before that, let's have a look at what is the trade in terms of EUDR commodities. So India is exporting around 479 items that is exported from India is covered by this legislation, and approximately around 1.3 billion US dollars worth of trade happens in the EUDR commodities, and 23.6% of EU share in India global export will be impacted, and this will have a deep impact on sectors like coffee sector, leather, paper, and pulp, wood and furniture industry. So we have been interacting with this sector for quite some time now, and what we felt is that we have found two types of stakeholders. Around 40% of them, they're aware of the legislation, they have heard of the legislation, they have done some sort of preparatory measures for the legislation, and they're on the way to compliance. But we also find that 60% of the stakeholders that we speak to, irrespective of the industry, because EUDR covers a wide commodity spectrum. So across the EUDR commodity spectrum, we find that as of now, even there are good amount of stakeholders who are still trying to navigate this regulation and engaging how it is going to affect them. So just to know, the impact on your business is related to your current level of compliance. Imagine if you're already FSC certified, or if you have some sort of due diligence system that is already in place, it will make your compliance work very easy. And also, lack of awareness of the legislation will make you push in the last minute when you realize that you cannot export to Europe without complying with this legislation, and that may cost significant amount of effort and financial resource allocation for completion, and also with a very tight deadline that you need to comply with. So India has been pushing this legislation. I've been checking. There is not much in the press, but what I can see is that India has taken a decision to speak against the legislation at multilateral fora. But that's something happening parallelly. So potential impacts of this regulation, as we see, there will be increased supply chain transparency because the legislation is set in such a way that you will be able to track back the produce to the particular farm or the forest where it was produced, and then you need to provide geolocation and date of production to your upstream buyers. And there will be increased scrutiny from your buyers in Europe. They will be asking you many questions in relation to deforestation and the local laws that you're complying with. And if you are not complying, then of course you will have a restriction to trade with European partners. And of course, certification would be growing. The amount of people who are getting certified for various certification schemes would see an increase, and there will be also use of technologies that will be increased use of technology. You could see FSC Trace, for example, how they have modified their system to fit with the EUDR. So this presentation is reflected to show all the recent developments in this particular regulation. So it is updated, to the most recent updates. So EU wants to minimize the consumption of products that are coming from supply chains that are associated with forest deforestation or degradation. So they want to minimize the consumption of products or supply chains, products that come from supply chains that have caused deforestation or degradation, and they want to increase the demand for clean products that has not caused this deforestation or degradation. So EUDR requires that the products that are placed in Europe that comes under the regulation is deforestation free, and it is produced in compliance with the relevant laws of the country of origin and accompanied by due diligence statement. So these are the commodities that are covered under EUDR. If you want to know which if you are affected, then you should look at Annex 1 of the regulation. And Annex 1 of the regulation has mentioned the HS codes or the custom codes for the products that are covered under the regulation. There are some exceptions, like if you're making a material fully from waste or a residue or something that has completed its life cycle, then it is exempt. Packaging, if you're using packaging as only as a packaging material to package your main products, then it is not included. And then you could have a look at Annex 1 where you can see the list of commodities. So I'm not going through this in detail, but you can see the HS codes. If your product comes under these HS codes, especially for the wood industry, then you are affected. So if you see something, an HS code with an X, it means that the part of that product that was produced with the EUDR commodity is being included in the scope of that product. So X4010 is conveyor belt or transmission belt or belting of vulcanized rubber. In that, X means you need to have EUDR compliance for natural rubber if you're used in this particular product. Some products are excluded, like Babasu, oils, synthetic rubber, rattan products, and bamboo products, because they do not fall under the scope of EUDR if you make the products only with these material. So the regulation will be applicable from the 30th December 2025. In fact, it was supposed to be active since last December, previous year December, but they have given an extension until the December this year. And for small industries in Europe, they need to comply by 2026 June. And any product that is placed in this period, in the transition period, it is not applicable. But if you are making a product that is under EUDR, and if it is placed in the EUDR market, and if it is being shipped out of EUDR or moved out of Europe, then of course compliance would be required. So there are some key components of EUDR. One is prohibition, which means if you do not comply with EUDR, you cannot export, or from inside Europe, they cannot. European companies cannot import that product nor export that product out of Europe. And then there is a due diligence obligation where risk has to be analyzed, mitigated, and a due diligence statement has to be formed. EU will nominate organizations inside their EU member state to police the legislation. So they're called competent authorities. And EU has already made a system, the EU information system, where you need to upload your documentations. When I mean you, the buyer in Europe has to update documentation in relation to EUDR. So what happens if the operator in Europe, or if your buyer in Europe is not complying to EUDR, then there is a whole level of penalties that would be imposed. That would become difficult for you as well, because you will lose your buyer. So if it is a very small non-conformance, then you have a mitigation option, but some of the fines are proportional to the environmental damage that has been created by that particular commodity. So it is a regulation with a penalty clause. I'm not going through one by one, but we will share the slides later. So who are the actors? European Commission is what forms the legislation. They're forming the legislation. Then there are member states, as I said, they form the competent authority. They will police the legislation. There are customs authorities who will be the gatekeepers before the product comes into Europe. And then there is industry in Europe, operators and traders. It is their responsibility to comply with the EUDR, not your responsibility. You are helping your operator or trader to comply with the EUDR regulation inside Europe. And if they do not comply, then they cannot place it inside Europe or move it outside Europe. And then the operators and traders have a legal obligation to comply. So here you could see a supply chain. So if you see whatever is outside the box, that is what is coming in. So operator, the first operator is the person who is importing the product first time into Europe. He has got a due diligence requirement. Traders may directly place the product into Europe. They also have a due diligence obligation, and also the exporter who is moving the product out of Europe. So they need to collect information, they need to assess risk, and they need to mitigate risk. So operators are supposed to do these three things, and they should implement a due diligence system. And they have an obligation to share this due diligence system with the competent authorities. And annually reporting, it's only for small, medium enterprises. We will see what constitutes a small, medium enterprise later. So what is deforestation free? It means that the product should not have caused deforestation. Yeah, not the cutoff date for deforestation is 31st of December 2020. So your product should not have caused deforestation on this date. So that is the cutoff date for EUDR. So any land use change from a primary forest, naturally regenerated forest, or a planted forest, or a plantation forest to agriculture would constitute deforestation. So and forest degradation means it is a structural change of a forest. So basically, you are changing the quality of the forest to a lower level. So if you're converting a primary forest into plantation forest or another woodland, that is an example of a forest degradation. You are changing, you are decreasing the quality of the forest. So this diagram would explain to you. So primary forest to another wooded area is an example of a degradation, or a primary forest to a planted forest, or a primary forest to a plantation forest. These are examples of degradation. And apart from that, if you remember the initial slide, EUDR means your product must be deforestation free, degradation free, and should comply with the legislation of that particular country of production. So what are the legislations? So land use rights, environmental protection, forest related rights, labor rights, and human rights under international law. Third party rights, free, prior, and informed consent where it is applicable, all your regular tax, anti-corruption, trade, and customs regulation. So you should analyze what is applicable for you, and then you need to analyze what is the risk. If there is a risk, you mitigate it, and you need to keep verifiable evidence of your compliance. So when a product is moving into Europe, what you will see is that Europe, you need to provide certain information to your buyer. That will include the description of the product, the quantity, what is the country of production, the geolocation of the plots of land, the supplier name, buyer name, and verifiable evidence. That's very important. You need to provide verifiable evidence that your product is deforestation free, and you also need to produce verifiable evidence that your product is produced in compliance with the legislation. And the components of legislation are what we saw right now here. And geolocation is an important component of EUDR. So if your product is arising from an area less than 4 hectares, okay, then you need to provide a 6 decimal GPS coordinate in GeoJSON format. If you are procuring or if your product is originated from an area more than 4 hectares, you need to give a polygon. It has to be a proper polygon. You cannot draw a circle over and say that it has come from under this circle. It has to be a polygon. And date and time of production, it requires, that is also another key component which you need to note. It refers to the date of harvesting of this commodity. So this date and time of production will move across different, from the farmer's field to the factory, to the producers, and then ultimately to the buyer. For in case of timber, the time range of production is seen. That would be the duration of harvesting operations for that particular commodity. Okay, and you can also have multiple origins, but like for one consignment, you can have multiple origins, but you need to have full responsibility for the compliance. You must carry out full due diligence, and you should also provide evidence that the materials have no risk towards EUDR. So this is like an example of how a verifiable evidence would look like. Satellite imagery could be used to identify changes in land use. Field visit is an example of a verifiable evidence. Independent third-party certification or verification options like FSC would be facilitating you to provide that verifiable evidence in compliance to EUDR. And you can also participate in landscape or stakeholder initiatives like government initiatives in certain cases, doing a risk assessment for a product for a whole country. But still, you need some sort of verification. That's where FSC could step in and do that service for you. And risk assessments, whatever that is done in towards the risk EUDR has to be documented. Risk has to be concluded, which means that you cannot keep a risk open. If there is any risk to your to EUDR from your particular production process or your supply area, then it has to be mitigated. And a good due diligence ultimately should look like this. You should have a public policy commitment. You should have document procedures in place. You should have a qualified team. You should engage with your suppliers. Uh, the supply chain should be traceable. There should be sufficient info for risk assessment. You should have done your risk assessment in a timely manner before the shipment is being sent, and all the risk is mitigated. And then reporting on the due diligence has to happen, and the performance evaluation. This can be internal audits and also third-party audits, which will help you, verify how good or robust your due diligence process is working. So even in this aspect, FSC would be a great tool to do these components for you, because the requirements in FSC already, even prior to EUDR, complies with most of the requirements of the due diligence system. So this is how the system is going to look like. There are operators who are based in Europe. Operators have the responsibility for compliance. And what the operator should do is they will apply on the EU website for a release for free circulation. So imagine somebody is buying a consignment of paper that goes from India. So they will apply for a release for free circulation. That buyer will apply. They will also upload the due diligence that is related to the origin of that material in compliance to EUDR. And two things will happen. Customs would verify the due diligence statement. They will approve the release for free circulation, or they have an option to suspend if they find that the due diligence is not in order, or if they have questions. Then the competent authorities, they will also carry out a risk assessment of due diligence that is coming into their country for a consignment. They may flag it in the information system, and further verification would happen. Another thing that is happening in Europe is to classify countries into low, medium, and standard risk category, and high standard and low risk categories, where based on which category the country is, then your compliance would differ. So with this, I finished this section. And if you have any questions, you could type your questions in your Q&A session. We would be answering them later. Anuj, you could take over. Suresh sir, you could take over. Sorry.
Yes, Adarsh, thank you so much. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So others, thank you so much. And let me thank all the participants for joining this very important webinar. I would be very briefly talking about FSC and EUDR solutions developed by FSC. Forest Stewardship Council, that is FSC, was established way back in the year 1994 to promote responsible forest management globally. And its mission is sustainable development of forests to promote environmentally appropriate, socially beneficial, and economically viable management of forests. And as you will see, most of the aspects of EUDR compliance have already been handled by FSC through its standards and procedures, which prevent deforestation and degradation, which is the focus of EUDR now. It helps in fighting the climate and biodiversity crisis, protecting rare and endangered species, upholding rights of the indigenous people, and ensuring fair wages and safe working conditions. FSC is a not-for-profit organization based in Bonn, Germany, with its country offices all over the world. Something very important and typical of FSC is that it is chamber balanced and there is equal weightage for social, environmental, and economic chamber in all decision-making processes, which makes FSC the gold standard in certification. The decisions are taken by consensus between the members of these three chambers, and their say is equally divided when the final voting is taken on any of the resolutions. This is at a glance the position of promotion of sustainability throughout the globe. So far, FSC has certified more than 162 million hectares of forests through more than 1,500 forest management certificates. More than 64,900 companies have been certified for chain of custody certification, and more than 1,700 promotional license holders are there to promote the sale or the holding of FSC products by those particular entities. As we say, FSC standards are global standards with local relevance, and we have 85 country adopted FSC FM certifications so far. We also promote ecosystem services through the verified impacts, and so far 89 such verified impacts have been promoted in 24 countries. Very interesting to note that 46% of the consumers who have been surveyed, they recognize FSC logo as a logo for forest sustainability. Now coming to the Indian situation, as I mentioned earlier, FSC has developed India-specific forest management standard, which was released in the year 2022 by the Present Honorable Minister for Environment, Forests and Climate Change. India also has a specific standard for smallholders, less than 20 hectare plantations, where the indicators have been greatly reduced to facilitate certification of smallholder plantations. FSC has got other instruments like continuous improvement program or group certification, which can help the forest owners or plantation owners to get certified. Now, this is the position of forest management certification so far. More than 332 hectares of forests and plantations have been certified by FSC through our certification bodies for about 17 certificate holders. So far as the chain of custody certification is concerned, It is a very fast-growing scenario for India. At present, more than 1,900 companies have been awarded chain of custody certification, and this figure is fast-growing, which indicates the sustainability consciousness amongst the Indian companies. Now coming to FSC's initiatives for EUDR compliance, FSC has launched what we call FSC Aligned for EUDR. And this has got three very key elements. The first one is FSC certification, which I just explained in terms of forest management and chain of custody certification. This certification is already in place, and it takes care of roughly 90% of EUDR requirements, and in some cases, it far exceeds the EUDR requirements. It has got 10 core principles for forest management, which already cover issues like compliance with laws, workers' rights, indigenous peoples' rights, community relations, benefits from the forests, environmental values and impacts, management planning, monitoring and evaluation, high conservation values, and implementation of management activities. So this core of certification is already existing so far as FSC certificate holders are concerned. Now, two add-ons for EUDR compliance. The first one is FSC aligned certification for EUDR. It has got two components. One is FSC regulatory module, and the second one is FSC risk assessment framework. And then for reporting, the third and final element is FSC aligned reporting, which has got due diligence report making and due diligence statement through the instrument called FSC Trace. All these additional elements for EUDR compliance will be explained to you by my colleague Anuj later on. And finally, what are the benefits of FSC aligned for EUDR? So if you are FSC aligned certification, then obviously the guesswork is taken out from the equation, because our standards are already mostly aligned with the EUDR requirements, and these additional components which I just explained ensure that you are completely EUDR aligned. Though FSC solutions or no solutions for that matter by any of the entity will provide you a green channel, which will be decided by the competent authorities of respective importing countries. Then it is also a natural progression of our certification, which ensures deforestation and degradation-free forests. There is a credible assurance in terms of independent third-party verification, and this verification is done by the certification bodies like Preferred by Nature. And there is also this risk mitigation component inbuilt into the certification system. And so far as the reporting part is concerned, there is complete traceability, which will be explained to you through the application called FSC Trace. You can generate your due diligence reports and statements automatically, and your data that is generated will be totally safe in the system. So there is no kind of anxiety so far as data security is concerned. So this was in very brief the work done by FSC for EUDR compliance. And now I request my colleague Anuj to please take over.
Michelle, sorry, it's Michelle who will take over.
Yeah, Michelle, please take over. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm sharing my screen now. Please wait a minute. Okay. Can you see my full screen?
Yes, Michelle.
Okay. Great. Thanks again for having me and having FSC here today to talk about our work and our views on EUDR. So as Dr. Suresh and Adash explained, EUDR has been in place in June 2023 and was originally scheduled to be enforced in December last year, 2024. EUDR is a very tough regulation, and the preparation time is very short for everyone. So due to various reasons, the EU Parliament and the Council have finally agreed to the EU Commission's proposal to delay EUDR by 1 year to give companies and authorities more time to prepare for its implementation. In this section, let's have a quick review of why EUDR leads to so many criticisms, which will help us understand what APAC countries are focusing on in preparing for EUDR. So not long after the announcement of EUDR back in 2023, 17 producers countries wrote a joint letter to the EU warning the collateral effect on small producers who cannot afford additional efforts to meet EUDR. So to cope with strong concerning voices from Indonesia and Malaysia, the EU formed a special ad hoc joint task force early last year to dedicate constructive dialogues with these countries for co-creating solutions. Yet, Indonesia still requests for a delay early last year. So as some other countries, including the US and Australia. And in May last year, even within Europe, a German cocoa trader even took legal action against the implementation of the EUDR, criticizing the disproportionate due diligence requirement, bureaucratic administrative burdens, and the very short realization time. So facing so much opposing voices, let's have a quick look of what APAC countries are doing in preparing for EUDR compliance. So first, Indonesia. Like I said before, Indonesia government has been playing the leading voice in APAC to call for a delay in EUDR. The government continuously communicates with the EU Commission about its sustainability efforts in reducing deforestation with the goal of identifying potential solutions, while the European Commission also reaffirmed its commitment to work with Indonesia and Malaysia to smooth EUDR implementation. One example of the work from Indonesian government is their work on updating their forest map. While when comparing the EU Forest Observatory maps with the official map of Indonesia, the Indonesia government found discrepancies with the EU overestimating Indonesia's forest cover. The government discovered that some shrublands and farmlands, such as oil palm plantations and coffee estates, has been categorized as forest cover by the EU, which might lead to non-conformity under EUDR's definition. This piece of work is very important because only by correcting the EU's forest map, which called EUFO, can Indonesia's country risk assessment claim be in the lower category, hence with less pressure on the corresponding risk assessment and mitigation effort? So another effort that Indonesia government is undertaking to make it easier for its producer to prove that their products are deforestation-free is developing a supply chain traceability system called National Dashboard. The system aims to be developed in the form of an online dashboard, collecting and synchronizing all data and maps related to various commodities at all stages of the supply chain. Then let's talk about Thailand. For Thailand, we must focus on natural rubber first. Firstly, rubber is within the scope of EUDR, and secondly, Thailand produces about 1/3 of the world's natural rubber, making it the largest natural rubber producer by far. The work on natural rubber also means potential implications and support for the smallholders. So in Thailand, Rubber Authority of Thailand, RAOT, is playing a very active role in making their products EUDR ready. They start a Thai rubber trade system beginning in June last year to drive the trading of EUDR compliant fresh latex. Last August, RAOT signed a MOU with an important natural rubber company. RAOT's role here is to verify information on the rubber production source and conduct risk assessment in accordance with EUDR before issuing an accurate and complete rubber trading information document to buyer. In fact, RAOT has been very supportive of FSC's work. In last October, RAOT signed an MOU with CMO, which is an important forest management consultant, to expand FSC certification in Thailand for EUDR. And our FSC colleague in Thailand has also been working with multi-stakeholders, including experts from academia, reputable NGOs, environmental consultants, forest managers, and private sectors to co-learn and co-create solutions to the challenges posed by EUDR. So what about Vietnam? The Vietnam's Department of Forestry is playing an active role to help related sectors complying with EUDR. This includes, number one, assessing gaps in the forestry and timber industry. Number two, preparing for an assessment of the forest maps to respond to EU requirements, along with number three, the establishment of a working group to develop and implement an EUDR adaptation action plan for the forestry. Just last year in October, a rubber producer and processor company celebrated its first FSC certification and compliance with the EUDR. This is an important milestone as it marks the first shipments of cargo with such a large volume of latex to the EU and the US in efforts to comply with EUDR. Next, Malaysia. In Malaysia, rubber sector is also an important focus after palm oil. The Malaysia Rubber Board signed a technical collaboration agreement with a technical organization for advancing agricultural practices to set up a digital trading platform for sustainable natural rubber. The Malaysian Rubber Board also rolled out the so-called Malaysian Sustainable Natural Rubber Framework last year, with the aim of ensuring that Malaysian rubber industry meets international standards, including the EUDR. So finally, China has been in close discussion with the Chinese government and other important stakeholders, including key accounts regarding EUDR. In fact, half of FSC's chain of custody certificate holders come from China. While a lot of source materials are originated from China, EUDR has a significant impact on global supply chains and on FSC's work. So next, before I pass the stage to our colleague Anush, who will be also introducing more details about FSC solutions, including the voluntary add-on claim called regulatory module, I would like to quickly show everyone a quick business case, also a success story about our work for your reference. So I will skip the company name. A latex company supplier called Company A sourced rubber for its latex factory in Thailand from FSC certified farmers that belongs to their own group FM certificates, and then sell to a German importer, Company B. Both companies have expressed their confidence in FSC 100% and the regulatory module for their comprehensiveness and credibility, so much that The German importer company is even financing smallholder FSC certification projects elsewhere in Vietnam. As these two companies are trialing FSC's blockchain solution, what we call it FSC Trace, with each other, and bring in an additional trading partner, which is a condom manufacturer, Company C. We think it will be a strong case example for how our system convenes the entire supply chain around a robust offering, from FM, COC to the additional regulatory claim. So I hope my session provides a brief overview of what other APAC countries are doing regarding the EUDR. With that, let me pass this time back to Anuj. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, Anuj, your full screen
Yes.
is visible. Yes.
Okay, so let me just start my presentation by saying that FSC certification is your best starting point for EUDR alignment. If you choose FSC aligned solution for EUDR, the products you are choosing are deforestation free. This is the claim that we can make. But FSC standards goes beyond the EUDR requirement as well. In some cases, for example, we have very strong social norms in our certification system, which ensures that the workers involved in forest sector are paid well. There is no gender discrimination, and all other core labor requirements are fulfilled. We also provide rights to indigenous people, so that particular aspect is also taken care of. So ultimately, what we believe is whenever any forest-based enterprises trust FSC certification or seeks FSC certification, they are committing themselves to responsible forestry and committing themselves for EUDR alignment as well. So just to brief you again on this, others, Dr. Garola has mentioned about this. What are the EUDR requirements? And by aligning to FSC EUDR aligned solutions, you can ensure compliance to each and every component of EUDR, be it evidence, submitting evidence for deforestation free status, compliance with the relevant local legislation, compliance with the social requirement, and of course, the product information that needs to go into your due diligence statement, the risk assessment, and the risk mitigation measures. So now, finally delving into FSC aligned certification for EUDR, it has two major components. One is FSC regulatory module, and the other one is FSC risk assessment framework. FSC regulatory module is an add-on module with EUDR specific requirement. So as Dr. Garola mentioned in his presentation, that having FSC FM certification or chain of custody certification will assure almost 90 to 95% of EUDR compliance. For the balance 5 to 10%, this add-on module, which is called regulatory module, can be followed. What exactly it does provide? It provides you a risk management tool. It also helps you in generating due diligence statement. And of course, supply chain transparency, which is the core of EUDR requirement. So FSC regulatory module has 4 parts. Part 1 talks about the additional requirement for forest management certification. Part 2 talks about requirement for chain of custody certification. Part 3 talks about trademark requirements. Ultimately, when you put your products in EU, what kind of logo, FSC logo you can use, what kind of promotional claims you can make on your products. All these aspects have been covered in part 3. And then, of course, part 4, additional accreditation requirement, which relates to how a certification body or a third-party verification will happen on your ground to accord you a regulatory module certification. So now delving into the additional requirement for forest management certification. There are 4 components that you need to do. One is collect information about the product, which Adarsh has already discussed. What are those information points? Then you have to assess the risk in your supply chain. And if there are non-negligible risk, then you have to also provide the risk mitigation measures that you want to take. Ultimately, all these information has to be collated into a form of due diligence statement, which you have to submit, which your operator will submit to competent authorities in EU. Similarly, there are certain additional requirements for COC certification. First and foremost, there shall be a COC management system, which will essentially means to have documented procedures. There should be key management representative who will be responsible for EUDR compliance in your organization. Of course, as required, if you have to create supply chain traceability, you need to have proper records of material handling, sourcing, and sales record. And ultimately, once you have documented all these things, you want to make a claim. And FSC provides you to make two types of claim. One is regulatory plus and other one is regulatory. We will be discussing in my subsequent slides what these two claims means. And as EUDR makes it mandatory that you need to be in compliance with all local trade and custom laws. So timber legality assessment is also a crucial component of this additional requirement. Ultimately, all these documents need to be put into a due diligence statement, which will provide all these information in one collated format. So how will a due diligence statement look? A due diligence statement will have product information. It will have relevant information regarding the risk in your supply chain. And of course, if you have identified any non-negligible risk, then risk mitigation measures will also be there. So how to conduct risk? So to make your work easy, FSC has developed a FSC risk assessment framework. It has been recently updated as per the EUDR requirement. And we have also developed a risk hub, which provides crucial guidance to people who are finding risk into their supply chain and wants to mitigate them. So some of the key critical solutions to mitigate risk have also been given in this risk hub. Ultimately, every supplier or an exporter would like to make a regulatory claim to ensure that you are in alignment with EUDR requirement. And FSC provides an opportunity to claim your product as regulatory plus or regulatory. We will be discussing in my next slide. So there are two kinds of possibilities. If your whole supply chain is getting audited as per the FSC regulatory module, then you can make a regulatory plus claim. And if your whole supply chain is not getting audited as per FSC regulatory module, you have smallholders or some part of your raw material is coming from control wood sources, then in that case, you can make a regulatory claim. This is an example of how a fully verified supply chain will look. If imagine a forest owner has got its FSC FM regulatory module on, it has been audited by third-party verification, so he can claim an FSC regulatory module. Similarly, a sawmill is also getting regulatory module implemented, a factory is getting it implemented, and ultimately the whole supply chain, if you can see, if is getting FSC regulatory module implemented, then the operator can ultimately make a regulatory plus claim. This is an example of how an FSC regulatory plus claim or regulatory claim can be made on your product or on your social media channels. So for example, the example says that we conducted the EUDR required due diligence for our product with support from FSC's robust system. We use FSC Trace to trace back to the forest to ensure that our products are deforestation free. This is a type of claim that you can make when you are EUDR compliant. So ultimately, once you have done your documentation, everything is prepared, you are willing to get auditing also, how this whole gamut of information is getting collected so that you do not invest your time in collecting documents again and again, and you invest your time in making proper operation. So FSC has developed a traceability solution, which is a blockchain-based application, which supports delivery of due diligence statements and other information. So let us take an example of a supply chain. The raw material is coming from an FSC certified forest. It may happen that raw material is also coming from a control wood source. In case if the raw material is coming from an FSC certified forest, the FM owner can utilize a FSC trace system to provide all required information regarding geolocation, time of harvest, species, etc. And this information can be then passed on to the downstream vendor who is a sawmill owner. In case of control wood, or in case of smallholders also, which cannot comply to this uploading of this information, the information can also be manually updated by the supplier himself. And once this information is available with the sawmill owner, He can then pass on this information to factory to processor, and ultimately all this information is getting collated into a blockchain based Excel ledger, which can be transferred to your competent authorities. So how to use FSC trace? First of all, any certificate holders who want to use FSC trace can configure their products. They can provide information regarding what kind of products they provide, what kind of volumes they trade in, and then they can also configure their trading partners, whom they are going to trade with. Once the traders have been identified, the product information has been inputted, you can also start registering your trades. So these trades can be uploaded in a single file format or bulk uploads also. So let's imagine a case wherein a raw material is coming from multiple sources. It can be from 3 sources, it can be in 4 sources, and it may get assembled at different factories. So the information regarding all raw material sources has been documented. The duration of the harvest has been documented, and this information has been passed on to the downstream vendor. And this downstream vendor has again manufactured something, and ultimately this product is getting assembled and getting sold at some point of time. So the all information of the whole supply chain is getting collected at one single point and getting transferred to EU competent authority. Now, what are the benefits of FSC trace? First of all, the system works for the chain of custody certificate holders and FM certificate holders. So in case of FSC certificate holders, the state of certification can be immediately checked. You will come to know which particular organization is still FSC certificate holder. If someone has not complied to the EUDR requirement or FSC's certification requirement, that particular certification holder will automatically be suspended from this trace utility. Another interesting impact of this FSC trace is that you are getting an automated COC report, which contains the volume summary, the species list, the product group list as well. FSC trace provides you an option to attach all legality documents, which can be your harvesting permit, it can be your land ownership document, or any other document which are related to facilitate the trade. Ultimately, all these documents can be seamlessly transferred to your downstream vendor, and you can choose what kind of information you want to make confidential. If any product information which is not relevant to EUDR requirement, you can choose to not show that information to your downstream vendor or to any other party into this supply chain. Ultimately, FSC trace is enabling you to keep all your due diligence in one place. So this is just a brief summary of the FSC digital landscape. We have heard how FSC trace is enabling to develop a digital audit report, which can be submitted to your competent authority. Our digital landscape also enable mapping the geolocation of the site, species data. It also helps you to get access to our risk assessment library, which have predefined solutions for mitigating risk as well. Now coming to the part 4 of regulatory module, or shall we say that once we have identified what we need to do, what are the additional requirements for complying to EUDR, and you are confident that you can achieve this. In that case, you have to contact your certification body. You can ask them to for a scope extension. Certification body, based on the risk assessment, can do a risk desk-based audit or can come for a surveillance audit and decide whether you are eligible for FSC regulatory module or not. For more information, you can go on fsc.org/start-EUDR. You will find relevant information, recorded webinars, and some very nice videos also on EUDR compliance. This is it from my side. Thank you. And if you want to know more, you can write to us at india@fsc.org. And I would like now others to explain how in a real world companies can implement FSC regulatory module. Adarsh, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anuj. Thank you for the insight. I will be again sharing my slides just for some housekeeping. I will again because we have a question session which people can ask questions to us. Participants, I will show how they use it because we have sufficient time before I finish for people to type a question in. So we have this Q&A session section in our Microsoft Teams. If you see on your